Hello, everyone. Welcome to the latest Thriving Talent LinkedIn Live.
Hi, welcome everybody. Great to see people here with us live. Do share questions and comments in the chat. And this is the first time in a long time that you and I have been doing this together.
I know, it's so exciting. I'm really happy that the two of us can be together for this really, really important topic we're going to explore with you in the next 30 minutes. And maybe just to set the context for those of you who haven't been on our LinkedIn Lives lately, Debbie's been hosting some LinkedIn Live events from the end of the summer to date, where you've been going into what's evolving around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Could you maybe just give us a quick recap, Debbie, of what you'd been sharing over the last couple of lives?
Yeah, sure. And actually, we've converted them to blogs for those who want to read them, because there's a few technical problems. When we talk about middle managers and how can they thrive and succeed at work, we do need to take a step back and look, well, actually, how has the kind of landscape changed? And I'll add some talking points so it's easy for people to see both. But the key piece is we focused on equity, diversity, and inclusion, and for reasons, many reasons, not purely the Trump administration in the early part of this year, a general fatigue as well, is we've seen the landscape of equity, diversity, and inclusion evolving. And new models, if you like, are appearing, and yet the challenges haven't gone away. They're still there. And the key piece around these challenges is as we all know, non-linear careers are the way forward for future fit organizations. We need non-linear careers to navigate personally and professionally. And for the first time in Europe, we've got 5 generations, and of course everyone has got different needs. And with the global mobile workforce, many of us are caring for loved ones across borders, which is why obviously we're seeing a lot of this global mobility clause and policy coming in. And the bottom line is, if I put my business hat on, CFO with Thriving Talent, is it's costing a lot of money. And the legislation has actually taken this conversation from a nice to have to a regulatory compliance for CSRD for Europe. And so all of that has stayed the same, and yet the landscape has changed. And the shift that we're seeing is it's now being rebranded or repositioned or recensored under employee experience and global well-being. So the outcomes are the same, but it's shifting expectations, and these expectations do impact the managers. So these are just a couple of data points for you. And as you see this, and you know this, Natalie, employees of different generations for different reasons want a different experience at work now, don't they?
And absolutely. Yeah.
And
in fact, if I reflect back on the last few months of the types of workshops we were being hired to run, a lot of them are centered on well-being and mental health.
Yeah, there's a huge focus on it. And it's and again, it's not, of course, it could be driven by agenda of humanity, and it's really about sustainability on all levels. And it's that sustainability of, well, it's costing the business a lot because of these rising sicknesses and burnout, which is why we're being pulled in. But fundamentally, again, well, who is that person who helps bridge all these various initiatives and policies and benefits to the actual lived day-to-day experience of employees? And it comes down to managers. And I was in London a couple of weeks ago at an event on the future of work and well-being. And a lot of conversation was on this medical model, the BPS model, coming into corporate. And I think it's an important kind of closing part of us setting the scene, is that we're looking at organizations through these 3 lenses. And of course, that's shaping some decisions. I mean, at this event, there were so many different providers, all fantastic. A lot on apps to measure your heart, our heart, and I don't know, all these things, Natalie, maybe we need to bring in thriving talent, but a lot of initiatives on how do you make sure you're at your maximum performance biologically and physically. But then again, ultimately, the integration of these comes down to the culture. And does it really create that employee health? And for me and you, this is where it comes into, well, who is that again?
Yeah.
It's the middle manager.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there's clear reasons why companies and investors and the board and the executive committee need to care about this, right? Because it's not only impacting the bottom line and the way that the company performs, but it's affecting people who work for you, which I know most leaders and companies care about. And, it affects your reputation on the market too, is whether you're an employer of choice. But going back to this point around, but who does this really lean on to make it impactful and sustainable? The middle manager, right? And we've seen this over the years. This middle manager is getting squeezed on both sides in terms of expectations from the people that they lead and the expectations of the organization who wants to implement all this good stuff. Could you tell us a little bit more about, that role that you see?
Well, I think you make the really good point about the squeeze. The middle managers, the kind of pretty biggest population, aren't they, leaders in most, most big organizations. And I think we should probably start with the squeeze, because they're squeezed from above. They're managing up, to critical business objectives and for business sustainability. And we're all well aware of the economic climate and the pressures businesses are under. So they're really, really being pushed for high performance and efficiencies and optimization. And of course, equally, the organization, to be that best place to work, is investing in all these different initiatives to support, like you say, on this model. And they're trying to navigate both these worlds, and it's not always clear how you do that and succeed. And in fact, often managers feel like there's a sense of kind of failing at both, and it's because the scope of a manager has changed so much. Hand in hand with the role of HR changing, there's the whole evolution means we're all taking on different roles, and so leaders and middle managers' well-being and ensuring there's a positive employee experience actually comes down to the role of the leader. It's kind of a core competency, isn't it? If I think of some of the training, like the getting to grips training around managers, that teaches them, doesn't it, the whole kind of onboarding and how do you manage that life cycle of employee experience. But in the last 2 or 3 years, there's a huge focus on the well-being element, and how managers are having these conversations which bridge kind of personal matters and corporate. It's really different. It's really different conversations, and we already know, and we've talked in the past, how middle managers can be often brilliant, like technical SMEs, and then they're given the kind of people hat, and even then they weren't fully equipped, were they, or trained to do so. And now there's this extra layer of, well, as listen, you also need to be very strong in your empathy and your emotional intelligence, and you need to have that kind of cultural awareness, especially in this global diverse environment we're in. And so there's this lens now on tracking engagement, well-being, loads of surveys, but also other apps.
Yeah.
And who's seen as that linchpin? Well, it's the manager. And I think what's scary is when you look at some of this data is, if you think like over a third employees So they're worried about their well-being, their mental well-being, and some, that 10th really struggling with anxiety or depression. Who's the first kind of point of contact? It's the middle manager.
And to build on that, Debbie, and I'm relating this back to some well-being workshops I facilitated last week for a client, and around 30% of the people present. So there was a couple of workshops, and one of them was on boundaries,
right?
And what were the self-limiting beliefs and behaviors and patterns we have around how we communicate and manage our own limits, our own boundaries. And I know for a fact middle managers' boundaries and limits are really tested. And this 30% you talk about, or this 38%, a lot of them are sitting in the middle managers' roles. They're not just people reporting middle managers, it's also the middle managers affected by this. And I think this also, I think, links to some of the generational statistics you have here, because what I'm hearing them say, whether it's true or not, is that they grew up in their career that if you really work hard, you'll be rewarded. And that success was the measure of your output and efficiency and effectiveness. Whereas the younger generations in the workplace don't define success by those measures.
No.
Attitudes and expectations are so different in many cases. And so it's hard I hear the middle manager saying, but I've got all this work to do, but my juniors or my colleagues who report to me are better managing their boundaries than I am myself. So it gets pushed back to me. And they're even more squeezed.
It's a really good point. And the biggest risk we have with middle managers is the mental and physical load on it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And it's okay, well, I need to fix it. And that's why we're seeing this stress on middle managers, and it's because as we start to put more data in place to track engagement and presenteeism and all these factors that are now kind of the headlines, middle managers know that play the most important role in what we call our visible and invisible attrition. I'll just bring that to life for those who haven't come across the terms. Obviously, visible attrition is fairly obvious. That retention and ongoing development of someone is heavily influenced by the middle manager. The invisible attrition is much harder to quantify or even qualify, and this is when people are coming to work, maybe, so they're there, they haven't left, and yet they're either not fully empowered and high performing, and that could be for a myriad of reasons, either in their personal life or professional. But again, a middle manager, their role is to spot that, is to notice, what's happening, what's getting in the way of this person, really being highly engaged or performing. And equally, as a manager, where am I getting in my own way with my own, limiting beliefs or blind spots around what this person might be capable of? And that's why, again, years ago, having a good knowledge of cultural diversity wasn't necessarily the role of the leader. Whereas now, you've got to know how to navigate these conversations. And so if you know your team's being tracked and your success is about whether you are holding on to people and developing them, and actually that's a struggle with juggling everything else in the squeeze, that adds even more stress. And this is where we need to think about, okay, well, how do we help? How do we help leaders? What can we do differently?
So you've already highlighted, Debbie, a few of the impact that this is having on middle managers in terms of what they're struggling with. What do you think are the risks or opportunities with this dilemma?
Well, I think the risks and opportunities come from identifying really that kind of increasing scope. I think if we look at, well, what is the success look like for that manager? And this comes back to what you said about the squeeze, is you've got to achieve the business goals. So kind of what's the risk of that as a middle manager? Well, if you've got quite a diverse team, and as you said, with different needs and some much better at their boundaries and saying no to not finishing it for the next day, then who steps in? And that scope around that whole employee experience, from the onboarding, right through to continued development, is it's not a pain point. It's another role that manager has. And so the risk is, if they are struggling themselves, or there's so many other balls to juggle, are they going to do it very successfully? And equally, there's a super opportunity around creating this trusting environment. And we really need that. We've talked about this. We really need managers. Middle managers have this unique opportunity, and it is unique to nurture their own kind of micro culture. Of course, it's going to be impacted and influenced by the bigger culture of the company, the country they're in, and yet you can still kind of control and influence your mini culture. You can be that team, who always comes out as being the team who are high performing and healthy and happy, and so you can create that. That's a great opportunity. But of course, the risk of it is, do you know how to do that? Do you know how to have those conversations with a diverse group of people to create that trust? Do you know how to make sure that people can ask for what they need? Because asking is one thing, but do you feel like, oh my gosh, I won't be able to give them everything, which is often a fear. So I don't want to ask, or I don't want to ask for fear of saying the wrong thing. So that's something that we come across a lot. And we talk about future fit organizations and what they need, but really, when you're equipping these middle managers, you need to kind of come back to, how can a manager help their teams and help themselves navigate their realities of life and work? That's really what they're going to kind of come down to. And how do they do that in a way that brings in that empathy and compassion and inclusion? That's really where we've got to get to, rather than just leave middle managers out in the cold trying to work it out for themselves. If you think of our experience and even your own experiences, when there's a sense of responsibility of, I've got to fix everything, and actually, as a middle manager, if you can sit down and co-create and co-design ways to meet the business objectives, but also to navigate what's happening and to succeed at work, especially with this hybrid mix of in-person and hybrid, you're gonna have more success. But too often we just put that responsibility on ourselves, don't we?
Absolutely. And I sense that this is part of the LinkedIn Live where people might actually want to ask some questions or share some comments around this. So we invite those of you who are joining us live to add your comments. They'll appear on stage with us as you add them, and we'll do our best to answer them. But maybe, Debbie, we could shift gears a little bit now, and going into the manager, this middle manager is squeezed, as we already know. There's a lot of expectations on them. There's a need for companies to better equip them. So knowing that we already have squeezed middle managers, how can we help them be part of this journey? How can companies help them take on this stuff without burning out themselves?
Yeah, exactly. Without burning out themselves. So there are there's many different ways. And what we've highlighted here are the ones which have the biggest impact really.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes back to that comment that often it gets forgotten, the kind of the fundamentals of when you're first given that people manager hat. Remind or educate middle managers on how do you set up that team charter. How do you go back to the basics of it's not all on my shoulders. We're a team, a community. What are our agreements? How do we want to work together to achieve our business outcomes, but also to be very conscious of the world we all live in. And you can see on the right on the slide here, I've mentioned before 5 generations, all navigating different life events, all posing as amazing swans. Often we have no idea what our colleagues are going through. And as a manager, you may not know what your team is navigating at home. And so creating a space, a team charter, which says, look, here we are. We do all have different events happening in our life. We don't have to overshare, but let's be aware of them so we can design the best system and microculture for individuals to be able to be high performing at work and at home. So make sure that you're educating your middle manager on the foundation fundamentals of your team charter, and take that responsibility of them having to fix everything. The second piece is we've seen how many organizations are getting better and better with their policies and benefits and trainings. We're seeing that, and that's great. And please make sure your managers are aware. I mean, how many times have we spoken to managers who have a huge amount of trainings and enabling policies, and they don't know about them. Yeah. So really, ensuring that they're aware and they know how to signpost to them. So again, they don't have to be the expert or the therapist. They don't have to be knowledgeable about cancer or menopause or babies. They simply need to know how to have those conversations and then say, I know that we have, all these different support systems and resources to help you navigate this right now. And of course, with that navigation and that awareness, it's also, as a manager, is you championing it. So it's saying to your managers, what we would love is you actually demonstrating that you're making full advantage. Like the other week, Natalie, I used our global mobility clause to work from the UK for a week because that made it really easy for me to be with my aging parents. A few months ago, you changed your flexible working model so you could be more present around, the age of the girls in your world. Yeah. So it's as leaders, we've got to actively champion so that people in our teams think it's okay. I'm not going to fail if I use them. Mm-hmm. The other piece, of course, is inclusive leadership. Again, we talk about it in every white paper out there. It says the top 3 or 5 skills are EI and empathy. Please don't assume everyone knows how to be empathetic and how to tune into emotional intelligence. So again, provide that training, provide that education. What does a successful leader look like? Some companies are scared of even using the word inclusive right now because of the shift. That's okay. Switch to how do you be empathetic, emotionally intelligent, a compassionate, human leader. Okay. And the final thing is, especially for those middle managers who are working in global environments, is cultural diversity is huge. We can have the best training on feedback, how to have conversations, how to create the right choices for our teams, how to develop. And when we're in a cultural kind of melting pot, then we as middle managers, we have our own blind spots. So how much do we know about them? And also how we relate to all of those different feedback cultures will depend on our culture. Yeah. So again, bring awareness or training, or at least buy everyone the culture map book that we didn't write, so we're not promoting it, but it's a super resource, isn't it? So yeah. This is really about supporting them, equipping and educating. Mm-hmm. That's the key thing here is equip your managers so they don't burn out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So to do all of that, how do we help middle managers be part of the journey?
Mm. Well, I think this falls in a lot to what you've talked about in the past, when you've taken kind of big, kind of global ED&I strategies, and you're taking them into, okay, how do we make them, how do we make them come embed them, and this is where it comes back to this intersectionality. So whenever you're really trying to create this humane workplace where middle managers can thrive, is being very aware that yes, you need all these policies and benefits, absolutely. And the only way you're really going to make a difference is if your middle managers can create those cultures. So it comes from the top down. They need to be inspired by your senior leaders. They need to have that role model for them to think it's okay. But then as middle managers, they also need to be developing and being applauded and acknowledged when they're stepping into that humanity. So really using this intersectionality to help them thrive and be those role models.
Yeah. And when we think about all these different things that organizations can be doing, which is the theme of the slide here on screen, we're not saying that you need to do it all, right?
No.
It's just about what are the different aspects you could choose from in the space of policies, in the space of benefits. But what you're pointing to really, Debbie, is this culture and this leadership part, which is what affects the middle manager the most in terms of their role and the role that they're playing and the squeeze that they feel. And what is the organization doing to support them to be able to enable the organization to do all the rest, right?
Exactly. And you can see on here things like non-linear career paths. Well, how equipped are managers to enable that, to champion that? So there's many pieces, and this is where it's so important that the vision you have for your strategy, whether you're calling it employee experience or global well-being, but that vision you have and what you want for your organization is that middle managers are part of that conversation. They understand the importance. They're part of that change journey, rather than just left to kind of implement. They need to be on board, don't they?
Yeah. So if we've got 3 minutes left, and I don't think anyone has posted any comments or questions for us, but what would you say, Debbie, are the top 3 things that people need to remember from this LinkedIn Live in connection to the middle managers context?
The first one is that awareness. Really be aware of the pivotal role that managers are playing, middle managers are playing, and take care of them. Okay, so noticing that first. The second thing is equipping them, helping them. What is it that will give them the best chance of success, whether they're managing up or managing across or managing teams. So really, what are the tools that they need, and don't making assumptions. And then the third piece is the role modeling. As senior leadership teams, be the leaders that you want your middle managers to be, and look out for them. So role model everything we've talked about in terms of humane workplaces, and you as senior leaders also hold the middle managers accountable to their own well-being, so that they also feel that they're thriving at work. So they're the 3 kind of pieces I would use to kind of distill from all of the various data that we've got here.
So what I'm hearing, Debbie, is like, if I'm an executive leader or I'm a HR director listening to this LinkedIn Live, is yes, the economic climate is tough, and that the organizations are needing to make budget cuts in many areas, and we know training tends to be one of the first to get hit. Is actually, it's a huge risk to the organization to cut any kind of training and support for leadership development at that middle management level. So you need to keep investing in that, keep supporting them to be able to show up and do their role. And also, you do need to take care of this group's health and well-being, because they do have a lot to carry. So if you're making those choices now for 2026, pay attention to that, because it's going to have that trickle effect, as you said. It's going to have that impact on the rest of the organization if they're not well cared for. And
exactly, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, take care of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being able to take us through that perspective today, Debbie. I think it's a really important one, especially at this time of year when there's so much
Oh my
that,
gosh,
that
yeah.
these teams and these managers still need to perform and achieve by year end. And for those of you listening or maybe listening to the recording, if you have any questions or you need some help on this topic, then feel free to reach out to us. Where we'd be delighted to hear from you.
Great.
Thanks again, Debbie.
Thank you. All the best. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everyone.